Does June have a new daughter? Hello, and welcome to One Burning Question, the official Handmaid's Tale after show. Joining me today, Madeline Brewer, who plays Janine, and Rachel Lindsay, a huge fan of the show. Episode 1, Season 4, ends with June saying the name Banana to Mrs. Keyes, this young woman in whose home she's staying and has sought solace. What does this mean?
She's been through a lot. She might be losing it a little bit, but also seeing something, I think, in Mrs. Keyes that is brings out that maternal energy in June.
Is it weird that I wasn't surprised that she said banana? I don't know why. I just think, I don't know, this episode, I felt like June's a little lost. I mean, she's obviously recovering, trying to heal physically, trying to figure out like the new surroundings and how everything's working. And I just think the lines are starting to blur a bit. I think that she's been through so much and she's still desperate to find Hannah, that maybe she is losing herself a little bit in this world and still trying to hold on to the world that she once knew. So when Mrs. Keyes, it's so weird to call her Mrs. Keyes when she's so young looking. But when she crawled into bed with her, it felt like a mother-daughter moment.
Yeah.
So I wasn't shocked at all, especially with Mrs. Keyes initiating the sentiments of I love you at first. I don't know, it was kind of an endearing moment.
This young girl who needs that mother figure in her life. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Rachel. That's so interesting. June is... she's just woken up again and is like trying to get her bearings and is thrust onto this farm with this girl.
Right, a child bride, essentially.
Child that she's like, oh, we got to do something about this.
Right.
I think she looks at Mrs. Keyes and thinks this could be Hannah if this world continues. Right. And she's looking at her saying, oh my gosh, this could be my daughter who's been
and that's why she's so angry.
And who is suffering and who's alone. And so I think that anger, when she sees her daughter within Mrs. Keyes, I think that's where the anger comes from.
Oh my gosh, it's so layered.
She's upset. She sees Hannah. I think at this point she's starting to see Hannah in everything.
Yes.
Something else I've thought a lot about with this episode is referencing Banana to Mrs. Keyes. Do you see that as a bit of a betrayal at all of Hannah? Either this is an act, or she's just transferring all this pain and hurt that she feels for Hannah onto this kind of, you know, unsuspecting young woman.
I didn't look at it as betrayal, which typically I lean towards more of the negative side of things, but in this moment, I felt really sorry for June. And she just needed to be comforted in that moment. And so Mrs. Keyes was that person for her.
And this episode, she's making up for, or attempting to make up for things that she feels like she's done wrong. And I think that she's doing that a little bit with Mrs. Keyes. And as you said, with, you know, imagining that this could be Hannah's life.
You know, clearly June has a weakness for Mrs. Keyes. Do you think this weakness could become a liability for her in terms of protecting the handmaids?
I think that the ways in which Mrs. Keyes has reignited that very intense fire for June of these guys need to go down. That, I think, is dangerous territory, because what has driven her in moving, you know, getting out of Gilead with the handmaids and moving them along is keeping everyone safe. With June in this first episode, it's just she's on thin ice here. There's so much danger. And I think that with Mrs. Keyes, it takes her a little too far.
When Mrs. Keyes comes to her, it reminds her why she came back, what she's fighting for. Young ladies like Mrs. Keyes, Hannah's, she's fighting for the future.
She has just basically told Mrs. Keyes, go ahead, take this knife and kill that dude.
Right, that's why the scene is so creepy.
It's so creepy. That in itself is just like, okay, this young woman that you clearly have maternal instincts. So she says, you know what, go ahead and do it, and then leaves. And so she's like, now you have blood on your hands, Mrs. Keyes, is kind of what I'm thinking. I'm like
she's
that's
groomed
very
her
weird.
in that moment.
Yeah, it's like a grooming moment, but then they go upstairs, or June goes upstairs and Mrs. Keyes follows her, and then Mrs. Keyes is the big spoon. Which I think is, I have to believe
you
is
mean the placement on the bed is very interesting.
Yes, that she didn't, because June had been on her, now I'm like dissecting it. June had been on her back, and then she turns and lets Mrs. Keyes
and she's
come
looking at camera,
her.
and Keyes comes behind.
Yes, she's not spooning her and holding her, and they're not facing each other.
Interesting.
There's something there.
But it takes on a different energy that I think it's not so much parent-child, it's kind of sisters in a very, very disturbing cause.
Yeah.
Sisters in the fight.
Sisters in the fight.
I feel like in that moment when she told her, make me proud, it was almost as if, and the other women were around to see it.
That's
it's almost as if she was training them for the battle that's to come. This is what you're going to have to do to get back to the world we want to see.
In some ways, Mrs. Keys is lucky that she is starting this journey when she's still a child, right? And conceivably she could be free. We don't know if that's going to happen, but she won't have the same fate as your character and the other characters who've already suffered, who've already had to lose children. So maybe in some ways, Mrs. Keys is the hope, you know, that maybe she's the last generation to suffer.
This is why I love this show.
I just made that up, so do not hold me to that. I really,
I don't care.
I have no...
I loved it.
Thank you so much for your passion about the show and these characters, these women. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thanks, guys.
If you have more to say about June's new daughter or sister or monster, tell us about it using the hashtag #OneBurningQuestion. Thank you so much for watching.